You know, I really thought that this was going to be, I could have sworn that this was a 4-fight card that was going to start at 10 p.m. East Coast time. And it ended up being a 5-fight card because they bumped up Yancy Medeiros versus Emmanuel Sanchez to the main card. Great fight. And they didn't start it till 10:30. And on top of that, there were 3 fights on the card, all booked for 5 rounds, 2 of them going the full distance. So it is late as balls here. It is 1:36 in the morning. Right here, the 24th of April, 2022. My name is Luke Thomas. I am one half of the Morning Combat duo. Brian Campbell, of course, was with you guys earlier today when he gave you the results and the analysis for Tyson Fury beating Dillian White. I am here to talk about a little bit of Bellator. I appreciate, and I always mean this sincerely, but like I really mean it now. I cannot believe that there's going to be somebody up late joining me for this, but apparently some of you are. I am quite grateful for it. So thank you very much if you are joining me. Thumbs up if you are watching live. Please hit the subscribe. I'm up here burning the midnight oil, folks. So if you would be so kind as to give a subscription to the Morning Combat brand, if you have not already, boy, that would be great. Let's see. We're not going to get to the entire fight card, and even the post limbs are going on now, which of course we don't have access to anyway. But I'll talk about the bigger, I think 3 of the 4 bigger fights on the card here. So, what the fuck am I doing with my life? All right, without further ado, let's get this party started. And I'll go for about 30 minutes today. This will not be an hour long. All right, let's get going. All right. As a heads up here, I've had enough caffeine today to kill a horse, and so even though it is quite late in the morning, I will not be able to sleep unless I have all of my meds and whatnot to go to bed. So you're going to watch me do them, motherfuckers. How about that? There we go. All right. How was your evening, folks? Was it good? Was it fun as you watch me drink ZzzQuil on camera? Oh, look, that's bad for you. Do you think I give a fuck? Breakfast of champions. All right. Hoes and pimps. Jesus, I can't see a fucking thing out of these. All right. Jesus Christ. Let's get to the I can't believe that they sorted it. I realize it's in Hawaii and that's the best they could do, and it's, obviously all these things are easier said than done, but that was surprising. All right. Let's talk about this. So, your main event. I'll turn this off here quickly on this side. In your main event, Cris Cyborg defeats Arlene Blencowe. Let me turn this up a little bit since some of you guys might be complaining for the volume. Yeah, it's a little bit better right there, right? How about that? Even better. Cris Cyborg defeats Arlene Blencowe via unanimous decision, 49-45 across the board. Would have been 50-45 across the board, but for the fact that there was either first or second round. Bellator does not really provide any, actually not really, they don't provide at all any public database of stats, and so I did take a screenshot of the stats they put on the screen, but of course that doesn't really necessarily tell you a whole lot. So the point I'm trying to make is she threw the referee, Jason Herzog, who did a great job, by the way, and I loved that he took a point away, like no questions asked. Didn't go, this is a very tough warning, and then 5 minutes later they rake someone's eyeballs and they're like, this is the sternest warning I can think of, absent taking a point. And they go in there and then they just, steal someone's NFT fund out of their crypto fucking wallet and punch him in the balls, and it's like, I am giving you a warning, mister, that really this is the most sincere warning I could ever. It's like, take a fucking point, man. Take a fucking point. They never take a point. Anyway, they finally took a point. Oh, great. And I couldn't even see the screenshot because you can't screenshot YouTube TV on my fucking computer. And all right, it doesn't matter anyway. What I'm trying to make is Herzog didn't hesitate because they give them referee instructions in the back, especially for the main event fighters, and they ask me if you have any questions, blah, blah, blah. Here's what I'm looking for. Here's what I'm going to say in these scenarios. And you can hear him on camera warn her, yo, she's down. Blencowe was down. and then she fired the knee anyway. Now, maybe she was trying to fire it to her other knee, which was standing in front of Cyborg, or at least it was placed anyway in front of Cyborg. And then, it was sort of inaccurate. But it was, either way, it was like, either you meant to do it and you missed, but that was not wise given, or it was poorly placed, number one, or, you meant to do it and you should get a point taken anyway. Didn't matter to me. And he took the point. So I like that. So that accounts for the lack of the 50 there across the board. And I will say that the scoring doesn't necessarily speak to, less how competitive it was. I did not find this fight to be ultimately all that competitive. I will say the two best weapons I thought that Blenco had would be, one, her overhand right landed a few times, and she had a good left hook behind it sometimes as well. There were a few moments in the fight where she was able to rock visibly. Not like rock in the sense that Cyborg lost her balance or something. Or she did get put over with the left hook one time. That was, again, it landed like in the clubbing part of the crook of the arm. It wasn't a clear punch. But the point I'm trying to make is, it wasn't like, when I say rocked, I don't mean that, Cyborg was, seeing stars or something like that. I just mean that it would rock her head back like that. There was a couple of times where that happened, and again, the left hook essentially pushing Cyborg to the ground, but thrown with intention. So it wasn't like the fight was super competitive in that sense. But Blenco, I thought, obviously did a much better job this time than she had in her previous outing with Cyborg, and showed unbelievable toughness. She had a horrible cut over the top of her left eye that got bigger and bigger as the fight went on, and it was bleeding everywhere. And even then, she was, before every round, she was out there trying to get the crowd and like rally them into it. And then the final minute, I counted it, there was 51 seconds left in the round, and then she does the Max Holloway pointing. I mean, Max will always be a legend for doing that in the Ricardo Lamas fight. But it's still cool when other fighters do it. So she points to Cyborg as like dead, right here in the middle. I mean, people don't do that to Cyborg even in this late stage of her career. So I really admire the guts that Arlene Blencowe had to go back out there, give it a run, take a bit of a beating, man. It was, it wasn't too bad of a beating through like 2, maybe 3 rounds. Through 2 or 3 rounds, you thought, it's Cyborg's winning. But there's a little bit of an exchange of punishment happening. But once maybe it was the first 2 rounds, or maybe 2.5 rounds. But it felt like for sure at the end of the 4th that like this was really beginning to add up. Yeah, so it's probably the first 2 rounds, I would say that. And then by the 3rd of the 4th, forget it. There was just way too much damage. Her eyes were getting swollen up, and the leg kick was pretty consistent for Cyborg in this fight as well. More so of something that's like a rhythm disruptor, or just to add in a little bit of offense, or feint up high and then throw low. But Cyborg looked to be, for the most part, the Cyborg who we know to exist at this point. She seems to still train with ferocity and intensity. She fights with a lot of that, although it's much more calculated than it once was. She doesn't swarm with the same kind of recklessness that she once did. She doesn't try to be a tidal wave. She tries to be, a little bit more thoughtful about entries and exits. Most of what she was trying worked. That linear up the middle front kick that was catching Blenco underneath the chin was so perfect. Right? Why? Because Blenco was like this the whole time, right? And if you're listening over audio podcast, she had her chin tucked, which you want, but she had her chin like really tucked, like it was way down here, almost touching the top of her like clavicle or something, like way down low. And so in conjunction with the fact that Cyborg was throwing hooking punches or hooking attacks, now you can go up to the linear position, and you're creating differentiation, and more, it's a specific attack for someone who is eyes forward, chin down. You can sort of, where the origin of attack is coming low to high, and then again, for all the reasons we sort of articulated, it's just a really great way to attack someone. So that was really awesome doing that. I thought that was really dynamic. And then she dropped Blenco, I think it was again in the second, with a hard right hand when Blenco got a little bit stationary. She did a good job this time, for the most part, with footwork, feinting, trying to stay out of trouble the best she could, making sound defensive grappling decisions, again, at a disadvantage, but not compounding her mistakes, I think is what you could say. It wasn't like she was, a lot of times you'll watch fights and you'll see someone get in a bad spot and then they'll make a risky choice. that ends up backfiring, and then it just gives the next position or whatever someone was looking for. And it serves them up on a silver platter. You didn't really see that here. For the most part, she was able to stop, neutralize, or not let it get too bad. She almost got crucifixed. I think it was 4th round, something like that, and got out of it. But again, she was just making smart, simple, but clear and very effective defensive decisions. Not enough to stop the accumulative onslaught of offense, but enough to keep her alive to get into the 5th, and then, have a punctuated and frankly kind of poignant moment there at the end, I thought. So she should be very proud of her performance. I mean, she's going up against an all-time great, even at this late stage in her career. How old is Cyborg? I can never remember. What is she, 35, 36? 36. She'll be 37 in July. Even at this late stage of her career, this is still a very, very formidable competitor. She has so many skills. She still has punching power. I'd say she still has punching power late, although I wonder, does it carry quite as much late as it used to? But even with all of that, she has a good jab. She has a good corner. She can wrestle. I was surprised. I did agree with Big John on that situation where we're in the championship rounds, and she hadn't really wrestled that much, but then she switched it up and got the sort of, they called it a suplex. It was kind of like a mat return suplex more than like an outright suplex. But what did it do? Lift, drop, and then you keep someone in a pronated position where they're leaning on the elbow or something like that, and it creates all kinds of opportunity for ground control. So it sets up the situation where you basically can just move the scenario to a different phase of fighting just by throwing up and then dropping them and then initiating the attack after the drop. But again, getting back to Cyborg, I mean, she still has so many weapons, and at this point, that she's now got almost 30 pro fights, only 2 losses, one to Amanda Nunes and then once in her pro debut, and that is it. She's beaten Arlene Blencowe. Since going to Bellator, here's who she's beaten. Julia Budd, who she stopped with strikes. She submitted Blencowe with a rear naked choke back in 2020 in the 2nd round. She TKO'd Leslie Smith. She TKO'd Sinead Kavanaugh, and then she beats Arlene Blencowe again. And I know what folks are going to say, because they say this every fucking time. Every time we talk about Bellator, everyone only wants to have a conversation about how Bellator doesn't have the same roster as the UFC. It's like, oh, you think, you fucking genius, that they don't have the same roster? Yeah, of course they don't. The UFC is, if not incontestably, almost certainly a monopoly. Oh, you mean the other organizations in the sport who aren't monopolies don't have the same access to resources and the same talent roster as the monopoly? Gee, thank you for this brilliant observation. I greatly appreciate it. Wow. Where would we be without incessant reminders that the Bellator division is not nearly as deep as the UFC version? Now, this is 145. UFC even barely has one anymore. But you get the idea. You look at the competition that she's faced. It's not the same as what she was facing in UFC. And to go back to her UFC competition, Leslie Smith, which of course would be the same, Lena Landsberg, Tanya Evinger, but then it kicks up a notch. Holly Holm, Yana Kunitskaya. She loses to Nunes, but then beats Felicia Spencer. So it's not a massive difference, because you at least have the 2 crossover fights with Leslie Smith. Julia Budd, I think, would do quite well in UFC. Obviously, I think she's going to be in PFL this season. Blencowe proving to be tough. And then Sinead Kavanaugh, I think, was overmatched, but that tends to be true for a lot of Cyborg opponents. Anyway, it's a little bit more on par with something like the Invicta-ish run, with a little bit of UFC thrown in, or UFC-ish level competition in a couple different places. But the fact that she's 36 and she still has this many weapons and she's not physically shot, and you just look at the rest of the division, you're like, who the fuck is going to beat her? Dude, Father Time is going to beat her. That's about it. I even thought that Blencowe had the right idea here. We talked about it on Friday's MK, which was, she has to really go out there and, you're not gonna out strategize and out implement a very technical game plan over someone like Cris Cyborg. At least I don't think Blencowe's capable of that. I'm at 145 pounds. I'm not sure who would be, quite honest with you. Maybe Kayla Harrison or something like that, but that would be it. So you have to go in there and kind of just make it ugly and make it rough. And I thought there were times when she was actually making a good faith effort at that. Blencowe seemed to me have a lot of the right ideas about what her best chances were, relied on a lot of her toughness to get through of it, had a lot of good defensive work they had obviously planned around in camp that she was able to bring to bear, especially in some of the grappling contexts, although there weren't a whole lot of them. And she went for it, man. She went for it. She absolutely went for it. That was a great effort from someone who was overmatched, but there to win. It's a very, very, very commendable effort from her. I feel bad for her because now it's third time's a charm, and it was no charm. She doesn't get the win. But for Cyborg, they asked her afterwards, who do you want to fight? And she's like, I'm really open to the idea of like, whatever the fans want. And she mentioned a few names. Obviously, not least of them was Kayla Harrison. Yeah, dude. Short of that, I don't have a clue who they're going to fight for her or find her who's going to win unless she gets injured and like kind of hides it, or, has a bad camp, or whatever. Short of that, the only one that's going to beat her is Father Time. That is it. That's the only real reality that we have. She's 36 and she's still got this kind of a lead on people. She can still do it for quite some time. Obviously not the marauding force that she once was, even for UFC fights. The Holly Holm one went to a decision, but the Yana Kunitskaya one was 1 round. Lena Landsberg was 1 round. Leslie Smith was 1 round, although somewhat controversial. And then the Tanya Evinger fight was less than 3 rounds. Julia Budd was the 4th. That's interesting. Yeah, so the fights are going a little bit longer. In Bellator, since she's been there, she's had a 4-rounder, a 2-rounder, a 5-rounder. The 1-rounder against Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh was overmatched. And then this now 5-rounder against Blenco. That's impressive. That she's able to... She clearly is fighting differently, right? And that means that the fights themselves look differently, and then part of what it means to look differently is that they go longer. It means other things other than that, but it also means that the fights are going longer, and she still has the ability to adjust to that new reality as well. See, sometimes fighters get older and they can still do certain things, but some of that drops off, and when some of that drops off, it changes the complexion of the fight, changes the complexion of what they can do, and then their game kind of dissipates. Cyborg still has yet another gear to go to in order to facilitate these changes she's experiencing. It's pretty goddamn impressive. But I don't really want to belabor the point. This was one-way traffic by and large, even though Blenco, as we've said, had a super commendable effort. I want to say one last thing about Blenco. All I ever ask out of fighters, and I mean this quite generally, or quite sincerely, I should say, all I ever ask for is... I'll respect just about everyone who gets in there. Everyone's like, you have to respect everybody who gets in there. I'm like, everybody? I've seen some of these regional shows. I mean, I'm not going to disrespect them for getting in there, but, I think the everybody idea is a little bit over the line. But what I will say is at the elite level, and, fighting Cyborg, women's featherweight is not a very deep division. Not in Bellator, not in UFC, not anywhere. But nevertheless, I'm gonna give respect to someone who has put themselves in the position that Blenco has. At the elite level, all I ever ask is that, obviously do your best. But for someone who's been around for a while and is looking for like second or third chance opportunities, you got to wring the sponge dry. That's all I ask. Wring that sponge dry. To me, what will matter less, of course, what matters is the most is winning and losing. But I'm just trying to point out, I have so much respect for the fighters who sometimes when they lose, but you can see it. You can see, if you follow the history of their game, you can see what they have to offer. And then in the moment in particular, you can look and tell, did that person really give what they have to give to this fight to try to win it, no matter how bad things may have gone or what kind of lead their opponent may have had on them. I think you can quite clearly say Blenco did that here tonight. It's very commendable. Kenny Florian was another guy who I thought had a couple times he had second cracks at it. He didn't beat Jose Aldo when he got another title shot. But you can watch that performance and you could follow his career up to that point. There is not a single doubt on earth, none whatsoever, that he didn't try everything possible to put himself in a position to win. And it didn't go his way. But that effort, that willingness to go that extra mile in training, in the fight, everywhere, to me is maybe one of the more commendable things you can do in all of martial arts. I really mean that. It's people think it's obvious, like, oh, just try real hard. It's not about trying really hard. Lots of every fighter tonight for the most part tried really hard or something like that. It's not really what it is. It is an absolute reflection moment where you can, metaphorically look in the mirror and you can decide, I will leave no stone unturned. And that usually means accepting damage. It usually means putting yourself at risk. It usually means fighting out of deficits and relentless bad positions, the accumulative damage. Like, it's hard to do. Fatigue. booing from the crowd potentially. I mean, there's all kinds of things. And then you had these moments like, is this going to be my career? Am I never going to get the title that I had hoped for? And then you have to sort of contend with that reality after the fact, but maybe even some of the doubts during the fight as well. Dude, it is not an obvious thing. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen fighters who you might think are better than Blenco or better than Kenny Florian or better. I'm not saying those two are equivalent, but I'm just two names I've mentioned. I've seen fighters who were better than them, maybe you could argue, but didn't have that willingness to simply pursue the fight, no matter the consequences, right? And they did. And I think it's extremely commendable. Extremely commendable. That's my personal opinion, but I have a high degree of respect. It's not. You see a lot of people go, they go hard, right? Oh, I'm gonna, pedal to the metal, pedal to the gas to the floor all the way down, right? That's not the same as like crossing every motherfucking T and dotting every I, especially in the case of like Kenny Florian, where he had to get down to 145, and his diet had to be bonkers strict. That's the kind of shit I'm talking about. And for Blenco, having to be away from her kids because of all the travel restrictions due to the pandemic and whatnot, dude, I can't. I don't like being away from my daughter for a day, much less however long she had to do it. It's crazy. It's crazy what she did. So I really have I have genuine respect for the career of Arlene Blencowe, and especially in this performance, badly outmatched and still hung in there. Managed to score a couple of decent strikes along the way, and tried, man. I mean, how many people can watching this podcast can say you've done something where you tried so fucking hard you couldn't believe when it was over that you put that much effort into it? Like, almost like you got sucked into a riptide, and the only way to not drown was to fucking fight your way back to shore and to air. Like, unless you've been put in a situation like that, you just didn't even know if you were capable of it. And to do that in a pre-planning stage, to get I'm belaboring the point, but it's impressive. All right, this was the standout win of the whole card by actually, I might take that back a little bit. Certainly the most dynamic win. How about that? Raufeon Stots defeating Juan Archuleta. Wow, man. At 16 seconds of round number 3, head kick. And then he followed up with elbows from mount after Archuleta went limp backwards. Dude, holy fucking shit. Wow. Raufeon Stots is an athlete. Jesus Christ, he's good. Now, I will say this. I thought Archuleta had a great game plan, and I thought Archuleta was winning this fight pretty handily. I mean, Stots was 100% in it, but there was a big problem that he was having. It was relatively even-ish on the feet. Might even give Archuleta a bit of the nod there. But Archuleta was winning in the takedown battles. Now, at the end of I think the first, and again, I don't have this fucking in front of me, so I can't really defend this. Maybe at the end of the first, maybe at the end of the second, maybe at both. Stots was able to get a takedown on Archuleta, a well-timed one, getting underneath one of his big punches, but he wasn't able to do a whole lot with it. The bigger grappling story was that Archuleta was able to press Stots into the fence and then hold him there for long periods of time. Folks, Stots, I mean, you see what him defend that one takedown before he got he defended the takedown, then he did get taken down. But the athleticism on the takedown defense was absurd, right? But this is what I mean. This is why you got to have respect for guys. And obviously, Khabib's the best 155 ever, but you go look at a guy like Islam Makhachev. Folks have asked me what's different about their game along the fence line. And the answer is a lot of things. But one of them that is different is that if he wants to do takedowns with the upper body with, a C grip behind, with 2 underhooks, double underhooks, he can do it from there. He can drop his lock. He can go to a double. He can change it up and go to a single. But the other thing that he can do is, when he presses a guy up against the fence, even if the other one has both underhooks, although usually it's 50-50 in certain cases, he has trips and throws from there. Those trips and throws are hugely important for a lot of reasons. One, you don't have to necessarily move your lock, although there can be some different hand positioning that's required. But the point I'm trying to make here is, not only does it add yet another dimension to what is possible for takedowns, but the other part of that is that even if you don't get the takedown, if you attempt a throw or a trip and it's at least halfway good, you will create space. And then when you create space, it can facilitate the scramble. Dude, Stots was getting glued to the fence several long stretches by Archuleta. And if Archuleta is doing, if he's a little bit busier and he's landing, maybe it's 50-50, but it looks like he's busier, maybe landing a little bit more cleanly. Looks like he's the one, at least at a bare minimum, initiating the offense. Plus, then he can either get a takedown or at least press, Stots into the defense. Where even if that's not all that scoring, he's neutralizing anything Stots can do. I mean, Stots is only on the defense in those scenarios. So he had a good game plan. And I was very curious what Stots was going to do, because if you watch the Pettis fight with Archuleta, Pettis was able to wait on him and then absorb the pressure. We all know Archuleta, ridiculous motor, loves to kind of like joust and go. Although this time he was a little bit more willing to sit in the pocket. So credit to Archuleta for opening up a little bit. But for Stots, I was like, well, what's he going to do? Is he going to wait and absorb it? Because I don't know if he's the sharpshooter that a guy like Pettis is. And for the most of that fight, that proved to be true. But then outside range, you see Stots kind of measure with one hand a little bit, or at least just sort of, get his bearings. And then there's this level change from Archuleta, which Stots saw coming a mile away, throws the head kick, it lands with the knee and catches him, moves to mount, and then just buries him with a series of elbows before the referee jumped in to save him. Thank God he did. That was great, man. That was great. That's great composure after probably losing the first and second round. I mean, that's somewhat debatable what the scoring is, but you get the idea. Like, it looked like Archuleta was in control of the fight in large part. To have that great striking ability where you can throw something like that in that context by itself is great. And then to do it after being potentially down a couple of rounds in the fight as well, highly impressive. Now, it makes you wonder, right? Like, on the one hand, okay, he was able to have not the same overall level of sharpshooting ability that Pettis showed against Archuleta. Pettis did it for much longer and for much, much better. But Stots was able to win the fight with that, so you can't take that. He at least has some very dangerous ability in that regard. I wonder what will happen. I have to go look at the brackets, but I wonder what will happen in the next phase of everything, because I think his offensive wrestling looked great, and his defensive wrestling doesn't look bad, but it did look to me like he could be somebody who wanted to stall out and milk rounds, which I'm not saying Archuleta was trying to do, but if someone wants to do that, let me look at the brackets. I want to see this. I should have pulled that up ahead of time. Hang on. Bantamweight Bellator bracket. Let's see. So, if we look at this, there we go. Okay. Oh, so Stots and is going to fight the winner of Leandro Ego and Sabatello. So Sabatello won yesterday against Jornel Lugo. And I know you're like, oh, who are these fucking guys? Dude, Sabatello might win the whole thing. He might win the whole fucking thing. He is criminally underrated. And you have to wonder if he can get past Ego, and I think he can, what that might mean for Stots to get another guy. Like, I think he wrestled for Purdue Division I. What a guy like that, when he puts his hands on you and wants to press into you and hold you and then establish control positions. It's not like Stots is a bad wrestler. Far from it. But if Archuleta was able to at least neutralize him to some degree, you do wonder what kind of luck Sabatello might have if that ends up happening. So there was a lot to like from Raufeon Stots. Again, that head kick was just perfectly timed. And with the distance assessment as well right before it, I mean, that was really, really, really good stuff. And again, didn't get overwhelmed in the grappling, but kind of got put on the back foot from a volume and effort perspective. That might undercut his chances of winning against Sabatello if he doesn't tighten that up between now and then. Of course, I should note, I haven't even said this yet, this makes him the interim bantamweight champion, which makes, of course, Sergio Pettis the full-on bantamweight champion, which means, even though Eric Nixick is now coaching Raufeon Stots and he's got a bit of a mixed camp at this point, I did see some Rufus Sport coaches there. It does sort of point out at Rufus Sport they had Pettis and they have Stots, teammates, interim and then regular champion of the weight class. Pretty interesting there. So I wonder what will happen for Stots depending on what happens. If Ego beats Sabatello, then shit, dude, Stots might win the whole thing. We'll have to see. But Sabatello might be an interesting test. Pay attention to that matchup if that's what, in fact, we get, because I think Stots, if he has the right game plan, can win it and probably should win it. But if he's a little bit more back-footish against someone like Sabatello, that could cost him. But hell, dude, he is a dynamic athlete, and he can do it all. And for Archuleta to get stopped like this, which I don't think anyone has stopped him before with strikes, right? he's making history doing it. I mean, that's pretty impressive. A guy like Archuleta is hard to put away. I mean, who has Archuleta fought? People are like, oh, who's he fought? Let's see. Archuleta, here's his record. First of all, 25-4. Now, he has lost his last 2 in a row, but it was to Stots and Pettis. Before that, he beat Patchy Mix, who beat Hroguchi tonight, so keep that in mind. He beat Henry Corrales. He lost to Patricio Pitbull up a weight class, but okay, that's the best fighter in Bellator history. And then he beat he knocked out Eduardo Dantas. He beat Ricky Bandejas, Jeremy Spoon, Robbie Peralta, and then on and on and on there from there. So he's beaten some really good guys. Patchy Mix and obviously Dantas would be sort of the 2 bigger names, perhaps. But this was a bad loss. He is getting a little bit older. He was, relatively short notice-ish. Heading into this contest, so I do wonder what might be next for him, because this was it was supposed to be hopefully a reset moment for him, and it didn't end up being that. But for Stots got a lot going for him. As I mentioned, I do wonder about the Sabatello matchup. Gives me the heebie-jeebies for him if he doesn't correct some stuff. But overall, he's got all the tools you would want a fighter to have to win at the elite level. I'll put it that way. That doesn't mean he has everything that any fighter could have, but from a broader perspective, he has most. I said all. Let me correct that. He has almost everything you would want an elite fighter to have to win at the highest level. So solid win for him. Very dynamic finish. And by the way, great finishing instincts too. Like just jumped right to mount. Didn't hesitate. All right, this was a huge surprise. I'll cop the L on this one. I didn't think it was ever going to go like this. Justine Kish defeats, man, I can't believe it, Ilima McFarlane. And it wasn't really close. 30-27 on one of the judges' scorecards, 29-28 on the other ones. McFarlane didn't seem to wake up until the last 30 seconds of the third round. This was a very bad loss for McFarlane. This is a bad loss. There's no other way to say it. Now, a couple things stood out to me here. One, McFarlane had, 18 months off for knee surgery. It looked to me like she was a little bit rusty. People are going to say that this fight proves that she was never very good. I don't really agree with that. Now, I can say that you are what your resume says you are. And so, counting this is essential. It's not that you can look the other way. However, I'd be very curious to see what her next fight might look like now that this one has been underneath her belt. Because while I can acknowledge that people are like, oh, her striking's never been that great. Okay, it's never been a strong suit. I will agree to that. I wouldn't argue otherwise. I have seen her chain wrestling takedowns together much better than this. She seemed off. I think part of the reason why she seemed off, though, was that Justine Kish had defense ready to go, and I think was surprisingly strong for her. That was the interesting part to me. Like, Kish actually had pretty good balance and was significantly stronger in any of the various lockup positions than I think McFarlane had ever banked on. So this is easily Justine Kish's best win, and this is very easily McFarlane's worst loss. Who has McFarlane lost to previously besides Juliana Velasquez? Yeah, that's it. Just those two. Now you'll be like, oh, well, who did she beat to get here? Right, Alejandra Lara. Dude, she beat Emily Ducati in 2017. Dude, Emily Ducati's good. Emily Ducati's a really good fighter, actually. That's a solid win. Alejandra Lara has limits. Valerie Letourneau is a good win. She got triangle choked with that one in the third round. And then Vita Ortega and then Kate Jackson, the last two she lost. Those are the two best fighters she's probably faced. By the way, she beat Emily Ducati twice. Jesus Christ, that's crazy. So I'll just say she's beaten good fighters. This is the worst I've seen her. I think, again, are you saying it's just the ring rust? No. I'm saying I think ring rust played a factor. I also think that Kish, being what looked to me super prepared for this opportunity, also played, if not a factor, perhaps it was the factor. Kish had a real prevent-defense style going on at first, but that's all you need against someone with a lopsided skill set. Right? If Khabib can't take you down and can't even get close to taking you down, okay, his striking isn't like terrible, but it's not going to be nearly as effective as it would be if those other pieces were in place. Her striking seemed slow and far away. It got a little bit better towards the end of the second round, I thought. But then by the third, it didn't quite pick up where it needed to. She did have a decent exchange on the ground one time. I think it was in the second round, and she was trying to lock up an armbar from underneath, and she did. Excuse me. Yes, she was trying to lock an armbar up from underneath and wasn't able to get it. So there was a couple times where she was threatening it, but of course Kish had threatened the guillotine just before that and kind of forced McFarlane to like go to her back on the ground. Like that's always, if someone's in the middle of a scramble where they're already both down, and then here's a great example: Louis Smolka when he fought Ben Nguyen. You'll see Louis Smolka several times when they're both already down try and wrap the throat for some kind of guillotine. Not because he's actually trying to get the guillotine, although if it really presents itself, he will, but as a way to threaten it such that if Ben Nguyen had kept going, he would then walk into the guillotine. So it forced him back down. I don't judge that as especially significant, other than it's just very smart by the top position player in that case. However, if someone is standing and then forced by a submission to go to their back, that is a little bit worse, especially where it's almost it looks a little guard pullish. It just seems it's got a little bit of desperation there. So I don't want to beat up McFarlane too much. I am much higher on her than Twitter would like you to believe. Twitter would like you to believe she's some fraud that, just got totally exposed. I'll say this: she did not display a lot of high level skill tonight. Justine Kish is a very limited fighter as well. It should be quite clear. But I don't think this is by itself, because the resume is what it is. The good parts and the bad, by itself is fully representative of what she can actually do. I think she looked real rusty tonight. But she'll have to prove that against quality opposition the next time out, because she couldn't get it done today. And yes, if you were saying, oh, well, she was the early champion in the weight class before it really filled out. Yeah, probably. I mean, there's probably some truth to that. My only point is that I'm not in any way trying to dissuade you from having critical thoughts about either of these fighters, or that the quality of the fight was low itself. The quality of the fight was low. It was a low quality fight. Rather, my only point that I would still cling to is that everyone wants her losses to not be representative of her, everyone wants her, it's late. They want her wins to not be representative of her, but this one loss to be representative of her. And my only point is that, again, the broader picture is, and I've seen her at her best, even against good fighters, and she looked a lot better than she did tonight. She seemed, I'm not going to say the comeback was too fast because she was off for a long time, but it seems like she might need another rotation in before she kind of gets back to her bearings. Just not enough urgency, not enough chaining of the takedowns. Like a takedown would get stuffed and then they'd kind of stall out. There just wasn't enough of that. There wasn't enough of dynamic guard play. There's just a lot of offense missing. And the punches kind of seemed like they were underwater. And it's hard to come back from an injury, and it's hard to come back from time off. Ilima McFarlane is a gem of a person. She has the best walkout in all of Bellator. She has one of the better walkouts in all of MMA. That pro-Hawaiian shit is amazing to see. But she had a bad night tonight. There's really just no other way to say it. She had a bad night tonight. And Justine Kish, I think definitely A, overperformed relative to expectations, and B, it's not an accident that she did, because it really looked like her team had worked on very specific scenarios where crucial points of her defense were going to need to be there. And they were. And it got her the fight. All right, Patchy Mix defeats Kyoji Hroguchi. Can you believe it? This one I didn't see coming either, but this one was close. 48-47 across the board. So if you had a scorecard for Hroguchi, I think it's fine. No problem. You could give him rounds 2, 3, and 4 maybe. Rounds 1 and 5 you couldn't. Round 1, Mix had the back for 4+ minutes. Could potentially have given him a 10-8, but they didn't. They gave him a 10-9. And then the 5th, he had significant control as well. So he would have given him those two. I think the swing round would maybe be the 2nd, something like that. But the judges didn't sway. Patchy Mix was able to amazingly find his way to the back, lock up a body triangle, and then with the exception of I think in the 5th where Hroguchi was able to escape one time from that, more or less, able to hold it for either the duration of the round after he got it or for a bare minimum a long time, long stretches where he was able to keep the back control, and that was what won him that. Now, this was the first time in a while where I was like, okay, if you're going to compete as a smaller person in the weight class, there should be a couple of advantages. One, hopefully you have some power that carries. That wouldn't say it's Hroguchi's ball game, but the other one would be athleticism and in particular speed. His speed is significant. He moves much more nimbly than a lot of these guys and was clearly fleeter of foot than Mix. The problem with that was when Mix was able to lock up with him and he was able to time a lot of those entries, he was able to wait and absorb pressure from Hroguchi and then find his opening. So he had done a great job scouting the entries for that. Dude, once he got a hold of him, Hroguchi was up against it. He looked like he was fighting outside of his weight class by a lot. Mix is not some gigantic bantamweight. I mean, he's a big bantamweight. I've seen him in person a couple times. I met him at High Rollers. I shook his hand. He's a very, very nice guy. Very nice kid. And he's not a small bantamweight by any stretch, but I've seen bigger bantamweights, just to be clear. And but Jesus Christ, he looked way bigger than Hroguchi. And dude, it's not just size, it's how you use it. Two different ways I would say he used it very, very importantly. One, how many times do you see him stretch a guy like Hroguchi off of his feet or to take him off of his base? Right? He would just lean and pull him backwards, and he would stretch him, like, drive his hips in and pull him up from the chin and pull back at the forehead. Just constantly, just like an anchor, just pulling him off. Amazing to watch that. And the other part was he would get into like a ride position, and then he would just drape himself over the top. Did you guys notice that too? Where he would put the center of his chest to the back of like the neck or head, not to get too far over, but just enough to like bend Hroguchi's posture over, and then hold position there, and then eventually put the hooks in and whatnot. Hroguchi simply had no answer for it. If Hroguchi could move and then stick and move and stick and move, yeah, he could win that fight and probably did win the vast majority of the moments that they were doing that. I think Mix had some decent striking along the way. He was trying some oblique kicks. He was trying some rear leg push kicks. He was trying stuff, but the best work and what won him the fight was not that. What won him the fight was the grappling. Dude, he was a human backpack is right. The thing that I think we haven't done a lot of consideration over about it in MMA is I like the body triangle because it affords so much control, but I don't like the body triangle because it actually limits your offense a little bit. Now, you might be like, well, how does it limit offense if it creates it by like attaching you to an offensive position? Well, it does attach you to an offensive position, but against Hroguchi, first of all, Mix had to switch sides all the time, so there's a lot of effort that goes into maintaining it in a case like that. And the other part is, dude, how many times have you seen grapplers who use the body triangle from the back have a really hard time getting a rear naked choke? You guys have heard me talk about this a million fucking times because you need the legs either to trap one of the arms or to bare minimum to move their hips, to control their hips. If you're open, you can move them in all kinds of different directions. If you're just closed, I'm not going to call that a stall position. That's not what a stall position is. But it does kind of bring the fight a bit to a halt is not the right word. It brings it to a stasis where you've got the person trapped, but because there's a numbers game that you can't overcome at that point, it's very difficult to lock up the choke against someone who's at all pretty good. And Hroguchi's defense there is pretty fucking good. So I'm not in any way bashing Mix. I mean, he did what he had to do, and I have no issue with the scoring or his performance. I merely mean to say, I just wonder about the future of that position a little bit. I wonder if folks, as long as that position is rewarded by the judges, which it should be, or guys get stuck in it as long as they have been, people will use it. I do believe it. I believe it takes more skill to open the body triangle and then use your legs, and it creates more risk for them to obviously reverse or escape it. But at the same time, with a very skilled competitor, it also creates for much more offensive opportunity, significantly more, either submissions or other kinds of position change or whatever the case may be. It just locks someone down. So now the fight is locked in that kind of position, and there's just not a ton of offense that can happen from there in those scenarios. However, that is the best win of Patchy Mick's career. That's 2 in a row now for Hroguchi. Man, Hroguchi came into that Pettis fight. Think about that. When did he lose that Pettis fight? I always forget. Was it the 3rd round where he got blitzed, or was it the 4th? 4th round. So, dude, I mean, imagine your feeling about Kyoji Hroguchi, and maybe it hasn't changed. I'm just trying to point out something. Kyoji Hroguchi has lost 3 of his last 4. Can you believe that? Now, that doesn't tell the full story because he lost to Kaya Sakura, then he got revenge on him, and both of those fights were in the 1st round. So he goes in there and he gets amazing rebound. Then he goes in there against Sergio Pettis, and through 3 rounds is kicking his ass. Okay? And then eats that spinning back fist out of nowhere, and then follows it up by getting out-grappled by a much bigger dude in Patchy Mix. Now, the problem is there's no flyweight men's division in Bellator for a guy like Kyoji. So he's still going to have to fight these big-ass monsters that are significantly bigger than him, and they may not be as well-rounded or as fully skilled in all the departments that Hroguchi is. But, dude, you can clearly see what just an outrageous advantage that is to be a big bantamweight against a very small bantamweight / flyweight. Huge, especially if your game relies on dominant force, positional control grappling. And there wasn't much to say about the grappling exchanges because they, for the most part, once Mix got it locked up, that's what it was. I didn't think he was going to be able to hold it that long, and I didn't think he was going to be able to get to those positions as quickly and as easily as he did. But he did. Goddamn impressive. Let me just say one. What time is it? 45 minutes? Yeah, that's about all I'm going to give to this. Let me just say, I really hope someone from Bellator is watching this, or if someone sees this, and I really hope someone from Bellator sees this. For the love of Jesus Christ, please don't start fights this late again, number one. But more important than that, that's just me being old and complaining. The one thing that I do think is quite fair to complain about and reasonable is there needs to be a database of stats. It doesn't just make my job easier for post-fight stuff like this. It makes any discussion of what the fighters are doing more easily. It's what a first-rate outfit should be doing anyway, and if they consider themselves a first-rate outfit, not the best in class, but a very high-level one, you need to have stats somewhere accessible to everybody. It is crazy, absolutely crazy to me that we don't have a way of assessing people's, Bellator campaigns, because we don't really have any meaningful stats by which to make comparisons or to understand their journey or anything. There's nothing about that we have that's public. The company that does the stats for them, BD, what the fuck are they called? It's like BD/sport or whatever. I looked them up. Their fucking Twitter account was like deactivated. I was like, oh, Jesus Christ! Like, really? We're doing this? Okay. Please, somebody there, please take this seriously. Have a repository online, at least for media, but really it should be for everybody, that catalogs the statistical performances of your fighters over the course of their time in your organization, that allows folks to make much more informed judgments about what has happened. I think makes the whole product look better and more professional. And it would just be a great service to media. Because I don't know what the point is of flashing stats on the screen that someone's just going to forget 5 seconds later. You need them after the fact, especially when scoring is tight, to make much more informed choices about what you saw and what you didn't, and what mattered and what didn't, and then what these stats tell us over time. We don't have any repository for this, so we just have to take fucking screenshots. I mean, please have a place where someone can go and get this information. I beg of you. All right. It's 2:24 in the morning. I gave you something, didn't I? I tried. We'll do a bunch of you. How about that standing arm triangle from Jessica Andrade over in the UFC show? I cannot explain to you how motherfucking strong she is. Oh, we knew she was strong. Nah, you knew she was strong. This is crazy. That's crazy strength to do that. I don't know if I've ever seen that before in the gym. A standing head and arm triangle. Not on anyone who wasn't hurt from strikes or something like that. That's crazy. She's so incredible. All right. thank you for watching. I greatly appreciate it. Have a great weekend for what is left of it. We'll go UFC heavy on Monday. We'll recap this as well. We'll talk more about Fury White as well, plus everything that's coming up in the next weekend. Yeah? All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, stay frosty.